Good morning, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you in this session. And I want to say thank you very much for tuning in and even to be here with me today. And I would also want to say thank you very much for your support, and especially for those who have subscribed into this channel. I want to say thank you very much for your support. And in this way also, it is a way of actually, helping this channel move more further, so that a lot of people can be prelude to this message. And as the leaders of the church have always directed, that we become instruments of the Lord in whatever capacity that we are in. And this channel, I wanted to dedicate it to be part of it. And from the area in which I am, I can see there's a lot of reactions and a lot of investigators. Missionaries are actually getting a lot of investigators through here. And I want to say thank you very much for your support and for what you are doing. So feel very much welcomed and feel comfortable as you have tuned in. And please, if there is anything that you want to add or an addition, please, I would like to hear your comments down there. Now today, I'm actually privileged to discuss the ministry of the prophet Isaiah. Because last time, when I discussed about the prophets, there was a lot of questions that I got through my WhatsApp. And a lot of members of the ward that I go to, and even those that I had to share with them the gospel some other time. And they told me, Brother Gabriel, why can't you just share with us your understanding and how the perspective of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, what they understand about the book of Hosea? Because there are so many interpretations outside there about the book of Hosea and all that. And this is what we want to delve in today, so that we bring at least some sense and sanity in understanding what the book of Hosea is all about. Now, permit me to begin with what the prophet Nephi spoke about the writings of Isaiah. Okay, and when we read in the book of 2 Nephi chapter 25, I will just read from verse 1, and this is what it says. Now I, Nephi, do speak somewhat concerning the words which I have written, which have been spoken by the mouth of Isaiah. For behold, Isaiah spake many things which were hard for many of my people to understand, for they knew not concerning the man of prophesying among the Jews. Okay, so this is what Nephi was actually, testifying, that a lot of his people then, they did not actually understand the words of Isaiah. They were kind of like very hard to them, because they didn't actually understand the manner of prophesying of the Jews. Okay, so Nephi said that to understand the writings of Isaiah, one has to understand the Jewish way of prophesying. And the same is true of Hosea, because he like Isaiah, like Hosea, just like Isaiah, because they come from the Jewish community, made extensive use of metaphors and symbolism. Now, each chapter contains at least one metaphor, and all needs to be seen against the background of Israel's history and tradition to be understood. So that is one of the major things. Okay, now one metaphor that is central to Hosea's message is marriage. Now, throughout history, every culture has prescribed ways to celebrate the covenants of marriage, because most people had personal knowledge of marriage. They understood the Lord better when the prophets used marriage terms to describe symbolically the covenants God made with them, and they also with him. Okay, so the covenant relationship between Jehovah and his people Israel was likened to the relationship between man and his wife. Okay, in symbolic marriage covenant, God is the husband, and Israel, the covenant people, is the bride. And that is what the symbolic behind it. And God wed Israel in the covenant of Abraham. And this is what many people do not actually understand. That when we read in the book of Genesis chapter 17, that covenant that the Lord is making with Abraham, that was actually the first marriage that the Lord was making. Okay? The Lord was making that covenant with the seeds of Abraham. So it started all the way in Genesis chapter 17. Okay? Now that covenant was renewed with Moses' people at the foot of Mount Sinai. So the same covenant the Lord is also making, that is when you read in the book of Exodus chapter 19 and that is from verse 4 to 8. I may not have time to read it right now because of time also. And also when you read in the book of Isaiah chapter 54, that is in verse 5. Okay? And just to quote it, it says that for thy maker is thine husband. Okay? That is what it says. And in the book of also Jeremiah, for those who've read also the book of Jeremiah chapter 3 verse 14, which also says that I am married unto you. You saw? For I am married unto you. That is what the Lord is telling the children of Israel. Now, further references to God's role as husband in the covenant are found in the book of Jeremiah chapter 3, just like the way I said, and also the book of Jeremiah chapter 31, that is chapter 31, I think it is around verse 32, and in the book of also Revelation, the book of Revelation chapter 19, that is in verse 7. So if you read that, you will get that relationship that Heavenly Father or God is actually, marrying. He's getting himself into marriage with his covenant people. Now, when Israel turned away from her husband to worship other gods, then she broke the covenants. Okay? She hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. And that is what, when you read in the book of Hosea, as from verse 2, that is chapter 1, verse 2, the Lord is giving that symbolism there. And he hath played the harlotism. That is now Israel leaving, her marriage vows, that is worshipping the true God, and then they start worshipping other gods. It is like committing, her becoming, committing adultery. Or in other words, it's being referred to as practicing harlotism. Okay? Now, there is one phrase that I always like that is actually quoted by one of the apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this is Elder Bruce R. McConkie, and this is what he says. Let me just quote. And he says, in a spiritual sense, to emphasize how serious it is, the damning sin of idolatry is called adultery. When the Lord's people forsake him and worship false gods, their infidelity to Jehovah is described as whoredoms and adultery. And that is what exactly the book of Hosea and the book of Jeremiah is actually saying. By forsaking the Lord, his people are unfaithful to their covenant vows made to him who symbolically is their husband. Okay? So that is what the Apostle Bruce R. McConkie is actually saying there. Now the symbol is actually central to Hosea's message. This symbol of marriage, very central to Hosea's message. And he depicts Israel's unfaithfulness to the Lord as that of a wife who has turned her back on her faithful husband to follow her lovers. Okay? And I think that one now resonates very well, especially during these seasons. People really understand, they will really understand that. Now, before maybe we continue, that is just a summary of what exactly the message of Hosea and what Hosea was actually speaking about. And that is the symbol of the message of Hosea, that the Lord, he's actually relating it to himself as a husbandman and to his covenant people who are Israel then as his bride. Okay? But now let us just delve in before. We need to understand who was actually Hosea. Okay? Who was Hosea? Now, the superscriptions of this book informs us that Hosea was the son of a man called Beri. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it very well. It is spelled B-E-E-R-I, Beri. But unfortunately, we know nothing about the father. Okay, hardly is it spoken more of the father. So the Hebrew name of the prophet Hosea, or in other words, when you pronounce it in Hebrew, it's Hosea, which signifies, or it means deliverance, and also it means salvation. So, and is derived from the same roots as the name of Joshua and Jesus. Okay? So by reason of numerous allusions in the prophecy to the northern kingdom, it is commonly supposed by commentators that Hosea was a native of that commonwealth. Okay? The superscription further informs us that Hosea was a prophet in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Does that ring the bell? And then finally also other kings of Judah. And in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, Jeroboam II, the king of Israel, who actually reigned around 788 BC until 747 BC. For those who understand the counting and the timelines, I think you'll be prelude to that. And Hezekiah, the last named of the kings of Judah, began to reign in 725 BC. Okay, around there. So we may not be far off from the truth if we date Hosea's ministry. They are from about 755 BC to 725 BC. So he was then a contemporary of 3 other great prophets. So that was about the days of Prophet Isaiah, Amos, and Micah. So it is believed that Hosea was within that period. Okay? So that was actually Hosea for you, and those are the kings that were actually ruling during the times of Hosea's time. But I will also refer you so that you may go and also search if you really want to know the background and the historical background of who Hosea was. We have one of the greatest resources. That is in the Institute resources. You can go check in some of the Institute literatures there. It will explain to you more about the history or the background of the prophet Isaiah. So when Hosea was called, what exactly do you think was happening in Hosea's time? Okay? What exactly used to happen in Hosea's time? So in the years of Hosea's life were melancholy and tragic, just like the years that we are living today. The vials of the wrath of heaven were poured out in his apostate people. Okay? And the nation suffered under the evils of that sarcasm, which was affected by the craft of him who has been branded with the indelible stigma. Okay? Jeroboam, who made Israel to sin, and the obligations of law had been relaxed, and the claims of religion disregarded. Okay? Baal became the rival of Jehovah, and in the dark races of the graves were practiced the impure and murderous rites of heathen deities. Peace and prosperity fled the land. Okay? Because there was abundance of wickedness, which was also harassed by foreign invasion and domestic broils. Okay? Might and murder became the twin sentinels of the throne. Alliances were formed with other nations, which brought with them seductions to paganism, captivity, and insult were heaped upon Israel by the uncircumcised. The nation was thoroughly debased, and but a fraction of its population maintained its spiritual allegiance. So you can see that that is the wickedness that was there, and those were the situations or the times at which actually Hosea was actually called. Now, can you relate that situation with our situations today? Okay? The things that Israel used to go through during Hosea's time, are they the very, very things that are going through today in our times? Yes, of course. Remember one thing, that it was President Spencer W. Kimball who said that there is no new sin in this world. Okay? In every generation they go through same things, but the only different is that the names of those sins, they keep on changing. But there is no new sin in this world. And you realize that a lot of things that are happening in the world today, they are the very, very things that used to happen in Israel during Hosea's time. Okay? Very, very things. Anything that you can think of in terms of murder, corruptions, you know, worshipping of Baal and all that. Those things used to happen in the days of Hosea. And today also we are seeing these very, very things actually happening in our time. And that's why we were told it's only a fraction of believers, okay, among the Israelites. Only a fraction of them remained faithful. But it's almost like the entire nation was actually drawn into wickedness. Okay? That is the situation. Now, is that the situation now in the world that we are living in? Yes, that is the situation now that we are living in. Okay? Now, how are we to understand God's commanding Hosea to marry a harlot? Now, that one has been the major key, because I have received a lot of questions about it. Did really the Lord allow, his prophet to marry a harlot? Or what exactly happened? Now, according to the stand and what has been taught in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that one of the questions that we'll need actually to ask ourselves, will God literally command one of his servants to take an immoral woman for his wife? That is a question that we need exactly to ask ourselves. Or is in this command to be interpreted only in a symbolic sense? Okay? Was it actually symbolic? Should we interpret this one as a symbolic sense? Okay? Now, interpretations fall into 5 general categories. And these categories, I've listed them here. Okay? Hosea was actually asked by God to marry a harlot. Now, those scholars who maintain, now that is now category number 1. Okay? Okay? Was Hosea actually asked by God to marry a harlot? Okay? Now, this is my explanation. Okay? Now, to those scholars who maintain this view, think that such a marriage served as an object lesson to call Israel's attention to their carnal state. Others have felt that such an act will be inconsistent with God, who cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. And that is exactly when you read in the book of Alma chapter 45, that is in verse 6 of the book of Alma, that is what the Lord is actually saying through his prophet. While the Lord was not commanding Hosea to sin, some have felt that God will not use sinful behavior even in an object lesson of this kind. Now, Sidney B. Perry said that who will be imputing to God a command inconsistent with his holy character. Furthermore, for Hosea to marry a woman with a questionable past will make it impossible for him to preach to his people and expose their sexual immoralities. They could point the finger of scorn at him and say, "You are guilty as we are. Don't preach to us." Okay, that is what Sidney, actually one of the scholars, actually, illustrated. Okay, that is now category number 1. Okay, now to category number 2, it says that the whole experience came to Hosea in a dream or a vision. There was neither harlot nor marriage. Okay, but Hosea was asked to accept the burden of being prophet or husband to immoral Israel, who was Gomer. Although possible, most scholars reject this alternative because of the intensity of Hosea's involvement with the imagery. Okay, so that was another scenario that other scholars will say that this is just exactly, it was just an imagery, it was just a vision in Hosea's mind. But there are also other scholars who are actually denying because of the intensity and serious involvement of Hosea's in these imageries. Okay, so that theory number 2 or category number 2, a lot of people have disagreed with it. And there is also another category, which is category number 3, which says that Hosea married a woman who at the time was good and faithful, but later became a faithless wife, a harlot, when she left her husband to participate in the fertility rites of the neighboring Canaanites. Okay, so in this case, Hosea's life was an enacted parable, and the phrase wife of whoredoms, that is according to Hosea chapter 1 verse 2, refers to what Gomer became. Okay, in other words, Hosea did marry Gomer, but she was not a harlot then. Those scholars who sustain this view explain that later in life, Hosea, looking back on his experiences and all that he had suffered and learned through them, recorded incidents that helped illustrate his teachings. The difficulty with this interpretation is that the Lord commanded Hosea to take a wife of whoredoms. Okay? So if Gomer were faithful and true at the time of the marriage, this phrase will seem like a peculiar way to describe her. Okay? So that verse also, that category or that view, also it is actually being disqualified from verse 2 of the book of Hosea chapter 1. So that is how it is being actually disqualified. Now, a variation of the interpretation in number 3, okay, that is in category number 3, okay, is that Gomer was not an actual harlot, but was a worshipper of Baal. Therefore, she was guilty of spiritual harlotry. But even so, it seems peculiar that God will ask a prophet to marry a non-believing wife. Okay? That is another perspective that a lot of people have been thinking about, and I was just, putting those points on how people exactly think about this book of Hosea. And then in category number 5, that is point number 5, it says again that another approach that avoids some of these difficulties is that the words present an allegory designed to teach the spiritual consequences of Israel and faithfulness. Sperry felt, there's a scholar called Sperry, that he felt that Hosea never did actually contract such a marriage. He explains, okay, the Lord's call to Hosea to take a harlotrous woman to wife represents the prophet's call to the ministry, a ministry to an apostate and covenant-breaking people. The children of this apparent union represent the coming of the judgment of the Lord upon Israel, warning of which was to be carried to the people by the prophet. So the figure of the harlotrous wife and children would, I believe, be readily understood at the time by the Hebrews people without reflecting on Hosea's own wife, or if he was unmarried, on himself. Okay? Now, those are some of the categories that I've placed, which are different theories that a lot of scholars have actually come up with. And these are religious scholars who've come up with. And this is what one of the apostles of the church actually spoke. That is Elder Henry B. Eyring of the quorum. By then he was of the quorum of the 12 apostles. Right now he's in the first presidency. I think he's the second counselor of the presidency. So Elder Henry B. Eyring of the quorum of the 12 apostles then, this is what he commented in his experience years before teaching Hosea to his early morning seminary class. And this is what he says, that the book of Hosea, like the writings of Isaiah, uses what seem to me almost poetic images. The symbols in Hosea are a husband, okay, are a husband, his bride, her betrothal, and a test of marriage covenants almost beyond comprehension. Here are the fierce words of the husband spoken after his wife has betrayed him in adultery. Okay? And that is when you read in the book of Hosea chapter 2 verse 6 to 7. Okay? He goes on through verse 13 to describe the punishment she deserves, and then comes a remarkable change in the verse that follows. That is from verse 14 all the way to 15. That is where now the remarkable change comes in. At that early point in the story, in just 2 chapters, even my youngest students knew that the husband was a metaphor for Jehovah, Jesus Christ. And they knew that the wife represented his covenant people, Israel, who had gone after strange gods. They understood that the Lord was teaching them through his metaphor an important principle, even though those with whom he has covenanted may be horribly unfaithful to him. He will not divorce them if they will only turn back to him with full purpose of heart. Okay? And then he continues, I knew that too. But even more than that, I felt something. I had a new feeling about what it means to make a covenant with the Lord. All my life I had heard explanations of covenants as being like a contract, an agreement where one person agrees to do something and the other agrees to do something else in return. For more reasons than I can explain, during those days teaching Hosea, I felt something new, something more powerful. This was not a story about a business deal between partners, nor about business laws. This was a love story. This was a story of a marriage covenant, bound by love, by steadfast love. What I felt then, and it has increased over the years, was that the Lord, with whom I am blessed to have made covenants, loves me. And you, with a steadfastness about which I continually marvel, and which I want with all my heart to emulate. Okay? So these are some of the scenarios that are actually, taught in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What we know is that this was just a metaphor. Okay? This was a metaphor that the Lord wanted to teach his covenant people of his stand with his covenant people, how they rebel and how they actually, and if how loving he is to them, and that the Lord is not actually ready even to divorce his people. He is willing to receive them back unto himself when they repent. And that is exactly what the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints really teach. It is not that literally that Hosea was actually commanded to marry a prostitute or a whore, okay? But this was just a metaphor, okay? It was metaphorical that Gomer, when Gomer decided now to start worshipping other gods, okay? And that is what the Lord is actually giving that relevance to the children of Israel when they started now worshipping other things other than focusing on their covenants, okay? Now let us just look at some of the symbolic names that Hosea was actually using here. Now, their biblical names often were taken from the circumstances surrounding the child's birth. Okay, in Hosea's narrative, Gomer, in Hosea's narrative, yeah, you realize Gomer bore her husband 3 children. Now, 2 sons and a daughter. The names given to the children symbolize the destruction that lies in Israel's future as a result of her idolatrous. How do you pronounce that? As a result of idolatrous her ways, that is children, okay? That is the children are the natural result of Israel's harlotry, okay, and righteousness. Okay, so the name of the first child was called Jezreel, is the same as that of the valley of former King Jehu's bloody purge, and foreshadowed Israel's overthrow in that strategic valley. It is a valley overlooked by Megiddo. That is, if you look at in the New Testament, Megiddo, that is according to the book of Revelation, chapter 16, verse 16, and famed for crucial battles, past and future. So Jezreel means God shall sow or scatter abroad. Since anciently sowing was done by casting handfuls of seed, it undoubtedly alludes to the overthrow and scattering of Israel. Okay, so I remember I used to sing our grandmothers do that in most of our gardens or shambas. They will simply just do broadcasting. Okay, they will scatter seeds, all that, and that was a symbol of what Israel was supposed to be done. So the name Loruhama, okay, Loruhama in Hebrew means not having obtained mercy, and suggests that no amount of mercy from God will set aside divine justice and save northern Israel. So the 10 tribes will be taken captive and be taken captive and be led away. Okay, so the name of the third child was actually called Loami in Hebrew, which means not my people. So it's like a lament and shows that by their harlotry, Israel could not be thought of as God's people. Okay, so with the last 2 symbolic names, the Lord predicted the negative results of sin. Okay, But in the next verses, that is from verse 7 and 10 of the book of Hosea chapter 1, it shows that he held out of his promise. He still, held his promise that he was not ready actually to give them up. Now, throughout the book of Hosea, okay, Hosea interweaves the promises of destruction or a curse with the promise of future restoration to favor. So this is just a vindication of the love of God to his covenant people. That among the covenant people and the Lord, who is faithful, the Lord is actually faithful, because he does not waver in his promises, and he is always there, waiting for us to come back to him. And this is exactly the significance of what Hosea, okay, was actually called to teach and to minister. Okay, so as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, what we do know, okay, what we do know is that the Lord could not allow his prophet to actually marry a whore or marry a prostitute. Okay, the Lord could not actually allow his prophet to marry a prostitute. And in fact, when you look at the customs of the children of Israel, a prophet, actually, for him to be accepted among the children of Israel as a prophet, he must have married a very straight wife. Otherwise, in a sense, that they will not even have listened or accepted Hosea as their prophet. And that was the custom of the children of Israel. But the issue of Gomer being a harlot, this was actually a metaphor that Hosea was supposed to use for him to be able actually to teach the children of Israel on their relationship with their God. That when they rebelled and started actually worshipping other gods and doing other things, they were likened unto actually committing adultery. Okay, they were likened unto committing adultery. So the entire story was actually a metaphor, a symbolism, a spiritual symbolism, that the Lord actually will not want his children to worship any other gods apart from him. But he is always loving, and he is always ready to receive us when we repent of our sins. Okay? And I would like us just to conclude this by reading in the book of Alma, chapter 45, verse 16. And please just allow me to look at it. Allow me just to find the book of Alma, chapter 45. That is chapter 45. I will read from verse 16. And in verse 16, this is what it says. It says, "And he said, Thus says the Lord God, Cursed shall be the land, yea, this land, unto every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, unto destruction, which do wickedly, when they are fully ripe. And as I have said, so shall it be. For this is the cursing and the blessing of God upon the land. For the Lord cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance." Okay? So the Lord cannot actually look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. In other words, also, he cannot allow his servants actually to marry sinful people, to marry a whore, a prostitute. So in that sense, that it brings to the entire story of Hosea as a symbol, it was just a metaphor. Okay? It was actually a metaphor. Otherwise, thank you very much for being with me, and thank you very much for watching us in this video. I would like us just to do us a favor for your support. Please make sure you subscribe and hit a thumbnail there. I would really appreciate by extending your support, and we are doing this to ensure that a lot of people, actually we reach some of our people, so that they may be able to understand what the gospel of Jesus Christ is. And also we are here also to clarify some of the confusions that people may have about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My name is Brother Gabriel. Please don't forget to subscribe. I really do need your support. Thank you very much, and God bless you.